with a sheet. I haven't done a very formal presentation, but I started with a sheet with notes, and it looked reasonably legible. And then as Cormac was speaking, I filled it up with lots more notes. And then as Donna was speaking, I filled it up with lots more notes because I cannot make head nor tail of it. So I'm going to do my best. As Hilary said, my name's Kim Leadbeater. I work as an ambassador for the Joe Cox Foundation at a national level, and I work locally as chair of More in Common Batley and Spen on a voluntary level in West Yorkshire here. And the reason I do both of those things, for anybody that doesn't know, is because Joe Cox was my sister, and Joe was the MP for Batley and Spen, who was murdered in June 2016. And, you know, as I always say when I speak, I still can't believe what's happened to our lives. I can't believe what happened to Joe. But what I've tried to do since that day is to channel my energy into creating as much positive action as possible from the most horrific of circumstances. So thank you very much to Rob and Karen for inviting me to be part of this fantastic event today. It's always a pleasure to work with them. I adore them both. And it's great that there's so many people joining the call today on this fabulous Friday. My background prior to Joe's murder was actually in health-related exercise and fitness, and a very holistic approach to physical activity and health and well-being. And I sort of specialised a little bit in behaviour change. So I used to think about how we could get people to be more active and adopt healthy behaviours. And now I think about how we can get people to connect within communities more, but some very similar principles there. I taught at Bradford College and at Dewsbury College, as was. So I worked in the public sector. Prior to that, I worked in the private sector. And then as a result of Joe's death, I ended up in the voluntary sector. So one of the things I feel really passionately about, which has been alluded to already, is the ability of sectors to work together. And I think that is really, really important in creating deep and meaningful change. But what I am very clear about is I am not an expert in a lot of this stuff. What I have is 4 years of very real lived experience. And one of the things that has got me through those 4 years has been the community. It has been the local community where Joe and I grew up, where I still live, where Mum and Dad still live, where Joe was our MP. You know, she was very clear she only wanted to be the MP for the area she grew up in. And I have been supported by that community and volunteers who have worked tirelessly to create a legacy for Joe, and not just locally. That has happened across the country as well, and indeed across the world to some degree. So I'll talk very briefly about the work of the Joe Cox Foundation pre-COVID, during COVID, and then a little bit looking towards the future. I'm going to try and cram as much in there as possible. Joe's Foundation has 3 strands to it. We do international work, or we support international work is probably a better way of saying it. We have the Joe Cox Memorial Grants that take place in 18 different countries around the world, looking at empowering women and looking at inequalities in communities in various countries around the world. Nationally, we've done quite a lot of work on the civility in public life, the toxicity around public debate, the abuse of people in public life. Those are things that we continue to work on. But the 2 things I think that resonate really with today is the local stuff that we do, and the local stuff that is actually also national stuff, because even though we do very granular community work here, we do it across the whole country. And the heart of that is really the Great Get Together campaign, which we've just had in June, and I'll talk a little bit more about the Great Get Together. But really that localised stuff that we do here in Batley and Spen is really, really important to me, and I think it's one of the things I feel most passionately about. And also the role of Joe's Foundation in having national reach and having a voice in Westminster and the corridors of power, but also really understanding what life's like for normal people in what I call the real world, you know. And I feel a massive disconnect sometimes. I'll go to stuff in Westminster, I'll go to big fancy meetings with people with letters after the names and all that sort of stuff, and I think, take that to Batley, love. Take that to Dewsbury, because people are just going to tell you to bugger off. Yeah. So I think that's kind of a really important role that the organisations have. We have to bridge those gaps and those divides. And I also, again, going back to this cross-sector thing, you know, the first meeting we had with local volunteers was quite intense. There were lots of people in that room. Obviously, this was not long after Joe was killed. There was a lot of passion. There was a lot of upset. There was a lot of emotion. But we got a lot done in a very short space of time. And again, that just shows the vibrancy of the voluntary sector. People who just want to get stuff done. And I love that. That's very much Joe's approach. It's very much my approach. But what there was also a lot of was slagging off the council. So there was a first sort of 20 minutes of people, well, the council should be doing this and the council should be doing that. And then it sort of went a little bit onto the police, and the police should be doing this and the police. And I just said, right, hang on a minute. We can sit here for 2 hours and go on about what people are not doing. We can moan about it, we can whinge about it, or we can say, do you know what are we going to do? What are we going to bring to the party? What are we going to take to the table? And what are we going to go to the council with and say, look at all this amazing stuff. Let's work together. Let's do some amazing stuff together. Then what we're also going to do is we're going to find the local business people who've got a big heart and quite big pockets, and we're going to get them involved as well. So we're going to go private sector, public sector, voluntary sector, all working together for the good of the community. So that was a real change in mindset for some people, I think. And then within the voluntary sector, there was almost a thing of, well, there's 500 quid coming up. We're going to bid for it. Don't tell them about it. Oh, hang on a minute. Well, I said, hang on a minute. There's 500 quid. We all want to do something good. Why don't you bid for that 500 quid? Why don't we bid for that other 500 quid? And why don't we do a joint project where we do something that's doubly amazing and fantastic? So that was my sort of real sort of launch into the voluntary sector. And it's been a roller coaster ever since, if I'm honest. So prior to COVID, prior to lockdown, we were planning the Great Get Together. So that was our big sort of national initiative. And obviously then we went into lockdown and everything changed. So we had to do, as many organisations will, as many individuals do, oh my gosh, what do we do? Do we cancel the Great Get Together? Do we postpone the Great Get Together? Or do we crack on and try and make it something really special and actually really more important and more needed than ever? And probably no surprises to anybody who's met me, we decided to do the third of those options. And we said, right, we're going to get on with it and we're going to make it amazing. And we did it. And what was so wonderful to see was on the back of all the community kindness and compassion that we had seen during lockdown, we had a wonderful Great Get Together weekend. Lots of things being done virtually, but equally we didn't want to exclude anyone, so we had lots of small acts of connection and community kindness, whether it was doing jigsaw swaps with neighbours or delivering homemade baking or sending some lovely little postcards that we had designed to people who you might not be able to be with. So the Great Get Together was a huge success, and I'm so glad that we cracked on. And again, you know, being quite a nimble organisation, being an organisation that responds to what's going on in the country, which I think is also really important, we also set aside doing something else, a new initiative called the Connection Coalition, which some of you may have seen. And what we felt in those early days of lockdown was that there was a real sense of men in suits on telly telling you what you can't do. And what there wasn't was much empathy and understanding for how people were feeling. And there was a real sense of loss. There was the sense of loss for people who tragically lost loved ones, but there was a loss of our freedoms. There was a loss of our connections on a human level. And we thought someone has to do something in that space. So basically, we set up this new organisation called the Connection Coalition. And it's for organisations to join and to look at ways we can keep people connected during this crisis. So, you know, we're very lucky. We've got great partners. We partner with the Red Cross, we partner with Mind, Nesta gave us some funding. And now we've got 450 organisations who are part of the Connection Coalition. Big organisations, but also small community organisations like, you know, chatty cafes and knit and natter groups and things like that. So I'm really proud of the Connection Coalition. And I think also coming out of this situation, which hopefully eventually we will do, we have to be looking at loneliness and social isolation, mental health, grief. We have to be looking at these really important issues that so many of us are going to be facing. And I think, you know, we're currently working on a plan for the Connection Coalition. At a very localised level, we got the call from the council, you know, do you want to work with us? Do you want to work with us on how we can deal, you know, with some of the localised problems? And we said, yeah, absolutely, of course we do. But what you found was, you know, and again, no disrespect to the council, but while the council were putting their plan together, people were just doing stuff. So these groups had just popped up all over the place and people were just doing stuff. But what it needed was a little bit of sort of organising. So we said, yeah, of course we will. So we ended up being a bit of a conduit between the council and between some of the COVID groups, the mutual aid groups and the people on the ground. And, you know, it took a couple of weeks to get going into that, but it seemed to work really, really well. So I was really proud. And I basically took my local staff team, which is only sort of 2 2.5 people, you know, in terms of hours, onto that. And I said, right, come off everything else. This is what's needed. Let's crack on with this. And that was great. And again, going back to what was said there about funding, we were very lucky that we've got a very positive relationship with our local council now. And they gave us the money to do that. They gave us some funding. And that was, as Donna was saying, it's about trust. You know, we've built up that trust over the last couple of years. And they were, you know, it's obviously a big thing, isn't it, giving money away? But they felt, you know, we know that these people are going to do it right. And fingers crossed, we did a good job of that. So that's that. So that's been a bit of judge. Am I out of time?
Yes, you're out of time.
Okay, right. I'm going to say two more things. So 2 more things. One is we are going to be doing a winter get together, and I think it's going to be needed more than ever. So please do get in touch about the great winter get together. Also, I'm going to be looking at developing some project work. I would love to pick your brains. You are the experts, not me. Anybody wants to get in touch about how we can move forward. with some of the stuff that needs to be done at local level, please just give me a shout. And thank you for your time.